Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Liz Truss's first U-turn of government policy, and she's still about 5 weeks from even being head of government, assuming she wins the contest. It turns out that her plan to cut the wages of people like teachers and nurses didn't go down at all well. So she's made an abrupt about turn. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when I keep saying that Liz Truss is truly awful in debate, that her approval rating will go down fairly soon after she opens her mouth. I think I might have said this as recently as a day or two ago. For those who thought I might be over-egging the situation, listen to what she's just been saying. Before I get onto the main event of her dumbass policy, followed by the fastest U-turn ever, I think. First, she said she would ignore Nicola Sturgeon. Now, sure, we get that she's trying to appeal directly to Tory party members, and even in the general election, she won't be trying to appeal to people who are any fans of Sturgeon. So political barbs in the direction of the Scottish First Minister are fine, all part and parcel of the rough and tumble of politics. But ignoring a head of government, is that really what voters wanted to do? What if she said she would ignore the head of government of an allied country like the United States, or France, or Ukraine? Would people think she was behaving responsibly? So how much more childishly is she behaving, if not downright disrespectfully, to say this about the head of a government of a UK parliament, a British parliament? Then she said there should be two internets, one for adults, one for children. Now, the way, in her limited brain, basically, this solves the contradictory requirements of Conservatives when it comes to internet access. On the one hand, they want to protect children from harmful content. Fair enough. Although it has to be said, they consider anything that's non-conservative doctrine to be harmful. So watch that. But on the other hand, they like to pretend they're in favour of free speech. Well, restricting the internet to protect children also restricts it for adult users. That's not free speech. So Liz Truss's brain comes up with the masterstroke. If we had an internet for children and one for adults, we'd be set. Unfortunately, there's a small flaw in this otherwise genius masterstroke. You may have seen it. How do you set up two internets and make sure that children never get to use the adult one? And for those who actually might think Liz Truss is the one to solve our various complex social, economic and international problems, consider this two internets idea and have a rethink. I've said it before, Liz Truss wasn't anywhere near the thickest member of Johnson's cabinet, but that bar was so low you could easily trip up over it. She is not remotely clever. I was actually musing yesterday. I wonder if she thinks she's clever in comparison with the rest of her cabinet colleagues. But anyway, on to the main event. One of her main policy announcements. She was going to introduce pay review boards for public servants around the country. The idea being, we're setting these pay rates nationally, and yet there's some parts of the country where the cost of living is much lower, so let's have pay review boards so that people's pay is adjusted accordingly. And she didn't mean adjusted upwards for the more expensive parts. No, she meant downwards for the poorer parts, and said so. You know, it would have the effect of cutting pay for workers outside of London and the southeast of England. She said so. It resulted in an instant backlash. And I don't just mean from people who are politically opposed to the Tories anyway. Of course there would be a backlash there. But Tory MPs spat their cornflakes out. Are you mad, they said? She tried to suggest this would be for civil servants, as if that makes it any better. But she also claimed it would save almost £9 billion outside of London and £11 billion in total. £11 billion saving on the wages there. Thing is, the entire civil service wage bill is £9 billion. So how does she expect to save £11 billion? If she sacked every civil servant in the country, and good luck running a country like that, where do the rest of the savings come from? The answer is obvious. She doesn't mean civil servants. She means nurses, doctors, teachers, police, paramedics. In fact, she means all workers in the public sector. To say that red wall Tories did their nut would be an understatement. The backlash was fierce and the U-turn sudden. The policy was dropped with Truss complaining that it had been misrepresented. Never mind the fact that it wasn't based on something she said. There was a press release. She published a press release detailing the policy. This is what journalists were reporting on. And the plans were reported widely, so not mistaken due to the misinterpretation of one or two. Rishi Sunak was delighted, of course. His team made a big deal of the fact that dropping a bollock like this in a general election campaign could be a spectacular own goal. It's a football reference in case Nadine Dorries is watching before she starts wondering what golf's got to do with it. And the thing is that this will be the first of many U-turns. Like Boris Johnson before her, Truss has a habit of coming up with quick, simplistic solutions to problems which sound ridiculous. Trying to sell more cheese to the lactose intolerant Japanese, using dogs to scare off drones around prisons. Stroking an apple in order to get people to like her. 2 internets to keep children safe. Making people in the poorer parts of the country make less money so she can cut the public expenditure bill. For all Liz Truss's attempts to draw on the fact that she's from the north, she seems to have adopted the usual Tory attitude of, well, what on earth do people from the north want money for anyway? What on earth is there to spend it on? Good job I didn't prepare this video on the morning of the announcement, because she may have U-turned before I published it, before I also knew. You know, we'll need to bear this in mind for the future. Mind you, Boris Johnson was known for his fairly rapid U-turns at times, but it usually took more than a few hours. Actually, it's probably a benefit it happens sooner rather than later. I suppose maybe it shows Truss acts a little more decisively, even if not with much more thought in the first place. But although this idea of just cutting back on spending outside of the southeast of England has been a common enough Tory attitude for a while, it's become an awkward one since Johnson captured the dozens of red wall seats in 2019. Because I'm not sure what the red wall Tories are going to think of policies like this. I can guess. You know, mind you, Cornwall gets shafted by Tory governments as well, and they keep voting Tory. So maybe the Conservatives think that people in the red wall will as well. Problem is that in the red wall, it's not really force of habit. In fact, they weren't at all used to voting Conservative. I can't imagine many will do so again if they're reflecting on a much worse standard of living since they lent their votes to Boris Johnson. I also can't imagine Liz Truss being as effective at conning them into voting against their interests with the same charisma of her predecessor. And what was Truss planning to do with this policy anyway? Abandon the red wall and commit to recapturing the seats that Cameron won in 2015? I don't think that's happening. And if she even attempted it, all it would do is allow Labour to shift ground. After all, if the situation in the red wall gets so bad for the Tories that Labour just nailed on to win, almost all of them back anyway, the party can broaden its appeal further and chase seats elsewhere. Frankly, the electoral arithmetic is no different to Truss than it was for Johnson. They cannot afford to abandon the red wall. Yes, they're going to lose seats there. And they'll be prepared for that. They can actually afford to lose some of them and still form a government. They have such a large majority, they can afford to lose quite a few seats. But they cannot just abandon the region. Strategic madness. But back to the U-turns. Worth bearing in mind that this was a habit of Boris Johnson that infuriated his MPs. No end of times he would force his MPs to back what was clearly a very unpopular policy. They would be told, don't sweat it, because by the time of the election, which is years away, it will all have blown over. And actually, that's often the case. That is actually true. But the policies were often so unpopular that he was forced to U-turn. Usually, long after it was obvious to everyone else he would have to do so. This makes those Tory MPs look like right tits. If the leadership persists, they can try and claim a few years later, well, look, the sky didn't fall down, so it wasn't as bad as people thought. You know, we knew what we were doing, trust us. You can't do that if the government U-turns. That's basically the Prime Minister saying, yeah, this is a really stupid policy after all. Oh, those MPs of mine that backed it, yeah, they're idiots as well. So the MPs who backed it just turn around and go, what? What have you done to us again? You know, because they look like idiots, often immoral idiots. And it'll be much worse if Liz Truss engages in this sort of behaviour. Because not only will they be closer to the election, so less able to rely on voters forgetting things at the ballot box, but she is unproven in a campaign. The last major campaign where she played a prominent role was the Remain campaign for the Brexit referendum. and she lost. I'm not sure winning the leadership contest will count for much. Beating a high-tax chancellor in a contest for Tories where some of them openly judge a person's nationality based on the colour of their skin is not going to be judged as the stunning triumph that she may think it is. And I think there's a decent chance that she will engage in this sort of behaviour. Consider that she is currently coasting to number 10. As far as the polls are concerned, who knows what happens over the next few weeks. All she has to do now is not mess up. She doesn't have to pull any dirty tricks to trip Sunak up anymore. She doesn't have to come up with any new policy proposals. Just have some vague responses that seem to answer the obvious questions that on closer inspection don't answer anything. The last thing she should be doing is making detailed policy announcements. What possessed her? But as Prime Minister, she will need detailed policy announcements. These ill-advised announcements and subsequent U-turns could happen quite a lot. Like I keep saying, Liz Truss is truly awful whenever she opens her mouth. The Tories are going to seriously regret backing her, if indeed they do. And the Tory MPs who did not do so are not going to let the ones who did back her forget. And as I say, that is assuming she wins. If Truss keeps dropping clangers like this, she may actually let Sunak back into the contest. Assuming Sunak can learn from his own mistakes, of course. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.